Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and man, am I excited for today. I only bring on a few of these individuals a year, and I say these individuals as in this profession, but I hope that everybody gets a chance to really listen to it 2 or 3 times, and really identify whether this is something that is a viable option for you in your goals and how you want to be remembered. Not that it's the thing, but it might be a stepping stone to help you live the life that's important to you. And so today we're going to be talking to Scotty. I'm going to butcher your last name, Milas.
Milas, no problem. Milas. I've been called a lot worse. Don't worry about it.
Scotty Milas. But he's out of Massachusetts. He specializes in and helps individuals identify whether a franchise model is right for their income and for their lifestyle. And there's lots of things to consider. We're going to get into it. I'm going to grill him. If you want to send me questions after, then I can reach out to him, or better yet, you can just reach out to him. What's the best place to get a hold of you, Scotty?
You can check out my LinkedIn page for all my contact information, but my email address is Scott, S-C-O-T, at scottmilasfranchisecoach.com. And
Milas is M-I-L-A-S.
You got it.
Yeah. So just so you get that done. But he's been doing this for over 35 years, helped hundreds of individuals really change their life and get themselves in a position where they're living their best life. And that's what this is all about. The Legacy, Fuel Your Legacy show, we want to help you identify where you're at first, identify where you want to go, and then give you potential solutions to get there faster and more with more fulfillment and happiness in your life, living in accordance with what your core values are. So I'm super excited. Scotty, go ahead and tell us maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes of exactly how you started out. I mean, you said you're in your 60s, so this long journey, how did you get into this, and why did you decide that this is what you wanted to be known as, somebody who is helping others build one of these types of businesses?
The consulting side of this is probably about 7, 8 years, 9 years young, as I say, but it's a culmination of all of my lifetime experiences. I was raised on Long Island, New York, middle income, upper middle income family. My father's dreams, goals, and aspirations for me were college, law school, and, kind of work in his law firm. And I was the total opposite of what he wanted me to be. I was not a school guy. I struggled in school. I was the class clown. I was the wise, what. But I had a passion for business ownership, for entrepreneurship. I had, my own lawn company. I had my own snow shoveling company. I had a painting company, all very, very young ages. And, I kind of forced myself through school. I didn't know I was graduating high school until the day of graduation. So that was a little nerve-wracking. But I tried college. I grew up in the pizza industry with an Italian family on Long Island. There were 4 brothers, and I stayed in contact with them and worked on my vacations when I came home from school. And they asked me to be a partner in their next pizzeria, and I needed $20,000. So I packed my bags, came home from college, and my father kind of looked at me and, WTF, what are you doing? And I said, I quit. I need $20,000. Can you help me out? I can be a partner in a pizzeria. Now, I won't tell you exactly what he said to me, because we like to think we have a good audience in the back and we don't want to go down that road. But the conversation grew to, well, if you really like that, quote, food thing, why don't you go to the McDonald's School of Management? And I looked at him, and I won't tell you what I said to him. But anyway, my life progressed. I got into different areas of business ownership. I got into the printing industry. I ended up working in the news media for a very long time as a member of the White House Press Corps. But my calling was always entrepreneurship. And flash forward, I had a friend of mine whose son was opening a pizzeria, and he asked me, my friend, if I would help my son open it up. I got connected to my friend's brother who was starting a fast casual better burger concept. And really, that's how I got into franchising. And so what I did was I took all the years of experience and decided, let's start a consulting company helping people decide if business ownership is the right path for them. Because in some cases, it's not. Entrepreneurship, I've defined it as two ways. It's either a visionary entrepreneur, someone who wants to develop all the systems, best practices, really kind of, reinvent the wheel or invent the wheel, or the what I call the process entrepreneur, someone who wants to be able to come in and delegate the systems, i.e. a franchise system that's a proven model, and go from there. So that's kind of the long and short of my story. There are a lot of little incidental bumps in the roads, a lot of success stories as well. But, I feel that my value in helping people is really kind of help them evaluate themselves, develop that business model, that plan, and then kind of introduce them to the things that potentially could fit.
So if we went back to the very, I say, I'm not going to go all the way back to the very beginning yet, but let's go back to the first pizzeria that you had the opportunity to be involved in. Did that actually come to fruition? Did you get the 20,000?
No, never got to 20,000. Eventually ended up owning my own couple of restaurants. So I eventually got down that path, but no, it just never came to fruition. My father was very adamant about, and actually to this day has still, poked me every once in a while about, why don't you get your college education? Why don't you get your degree? And, so it's more of a needle in his haystack or needle in his thorn, or his side, I should say, than mine. But no, I never got to the pizzeria side with that family anyway.
Sure.
So
what did you end up doing? Because you had quit school, did you end up going back to school and finishing at least a degree, or did you just said, nah, I'm done?
No, never went back. I ended up getting a tap on the back shoulder from my father, who knew some people that were starting a news network. I won't go into details, but ended up moving down to DC, was on with them for many, many years. Just eventually after so many years, got very bored of it and came back and started getting into businesses, into sales positions, started my own little businesses here and there. And, hindsight being 2020, I wish I had known more about franchising. And this is when I always go back to what my father said, that maybe the McDonald's School of Management would have been the ideal situation for me. But, when you're 18 and a half, 19 years old, and you're a wise guy like I am out of Long Island, the only advice you want is your own.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's interesting. I know somebody who went and got hired on at McDonald's to be a manager simply to go through the training. And as soon as the training was over, she quit, which I don't know if that's like the right ethical thing to do. But she got the education and she got paid for the education while she was getting it. And you learn a lot about not just the operations of a McDonald's, but a lot about the whole system and why things are done a certain way, which I think is extremely valuable. So what about initially the press industry, other than you kind of got pushed into it from your dad, what did you ever like about that? And what do you feel like, what are the biggest things you learned from the media side of the industry that helped you as a business owner?
That's a great question. And, when I reflect back on it, first of all, I was very young. And I think to this day, I was probably one of the youngest members of the White House Press Corps back in those days. Whether somebody else has come along at, whether at 19 or younger than 18, I don't know. But I think one of the things that I learned about that experience is hard work. In order to be successful or to be good at what you are, you're going to have to ask a lot of questions. You're going to have to put yourself in a position to want to learn, which are some of the things that I talk about with my clients now, and really implement what you learn. And in some cases, maybe take some chances, that whole thing on risk reward. So I think being on my own at 19 years old, 18 and a half, 19 years old, moving down to Washington, not knowing anybody except a cousin, really put me in a position to mature and understand the value of a job, the value of a business, and the value of making a buck. And I tell this funny story that the first week that I moved down there, and you have to understand something, my opening hourly salary was $4.01 per hour. And I calculated this out that I would be making about $15,000 a year without overtime. Okay, now this is going back a long time. We're talking about 1980.
It's worth something.
So I remember I thought I was going to be making, I was rich. And the office where I worked out of, the bureau where I worked out of, was right down the street from a Porsche dealership. And I said, wow, let's go buy a Porsche. Well, I couldn't buy a Porsche because I didn't make enough money. The guy kind of laughed at me when I filled out some paperwork. And so my point is that value, those years that I spent there, and also having to call my father up and say, hey, Dad, I need some help. I spent a little bit more money than I made, with my rent, really taught me about business ownership, or being part of a business, being mature, being responsible financially, and really set me off on the groundwork of becoming and getting into industries like the printing industry and owning my own print distributorship, owning my own recruiting company. It just really helped me become more mature and understand the value of a dollar without having to go to school, because I was always trying not to have to go back to school. I was always trying to provide or prove my father wrong. I don't have to go to school.
Right. Yeah, having to go to school is. I made it about two. I think I did finalize my associate's degree before I said, yeah, this is not for me. I found what I want to do. I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. And what's interesting about that is I actually went to my professors and asked them, hey, should I keep going to school? Like this is what I plan on doing. This is what I love doing. This is where I'm at. Is there any reason I should keep going to school? And they pretty much all of them, except for one of them, said, you kind of go to school to get a job. So if you have a job that you love, you're going to do, you don't need to go to school anymore.
Yeah, it's really funny because college doesn't, and even high school or any type of level of education, well, maybe some college does, they don't program us or teach us that our goal should be a business owner. They teach us and program us to go work for somebody. Yeah. And it's really kind of odd. I mean, there are entrepreneur schools. I mean, there's some great business colleges, but nobody teaches you about, hey, your goal should be business owner. They teach you about being a very successful employee and climb the corporate ladder. It's just really amazing sometimes.
Well, I think that even what I've witnessed, even the schools and the people who are being taught entrepreneurism, I don't feel that there's a good equilibrium of the pendulum right now. It's either, and I like how you wrote it, visionary versus process, but even inside of each of those, there's entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, there's people who really just like being an employee. And sometimes entrepreneurs are saying, well, everybody should be a business owner. And my perspective is, although I think everybody should operate their life like a business owner, from a tax perspective, definitely business ownership is the most advantageous way to be for the average human. But I think also, if you have the mentality that you're the CEO of your life and that your life is a business, then you're going to make different choices. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to go accept a job. And I think that the way you said it, know the value of a job, a business, and a buck, that's really important to understand. What's the value? What is the value of a job? What does a job provide for somebody, especially while they're trying to start a business? What is just like hey, I need to go make some money this month, so I'm going to go do this thing for this month to make money, but then I'm not committed longer than me. Understanding that separation, especially when we're talking about franchisees. Where would you say most of your franchisees, the people looking at becoming a franchisee, what type of income structures are they generally coming from before they get into a franchise type business model?
I would, another great question. And if just kind of thinking about my profile of clients and people that I've worked with over the years, I mean, I've worked with helping people diversify their portfolio that are multi-unit, multi-brand owners. I mean, I'm working with one organization right now. They own 100 units of a specific brand. I won't name the brand. That's in the cosmetology industry. They're at capacity. They want to expand. They want to get into something else because they want more. They want to build more wealth. Their children involved in the business now. I've dealt with people that are earning $75,000 to $100,000 a year. But I think when I look at the profile of the clients that I'm working with, it's that person that's earning that $250,000, $300,000 a year, and now is really itching and really kind of looking at life itself and saying, you know what, there's a lot more out there. I'm really kind of where I am, or at least this is where I'm not going any further where I am. I can make a lateral move, but now I'm interested in really kind of going out there and doing this myself. My kids are set, there's less risk because their children may be set, their spouse, significant other, whether it's women or men, that I'm talking to, their spouse is more comfortable. So again, it's a little bit of everything, but I would say that 200 to 250, 300. I mean, I have a gentleman right now that I'm working with, his liquidity is, somewhere around $9 million. And I'm like, why don't you take up golf and learn how to fish, or, vice versa? And he kind of, I'm an entrepreneur. I want something, but I want it a little bit easier than being that visionary entrepreneur. Like you said, Scotty, I want to be that process. I just want to come in and delegate and have the systems to hire somebody to manage manage that delegation.
Well, and at some point, your value that you can offer the marketplace really is less about being the visionary and trying to create something new. Sometimes it is that, and maybe that's his hobby until his hobby turns into a business. But having the ability to effectively run a business that provides income for other people and provides stability for other people, for that in and of itself is a very rewarding thing to be doing with time. And there's a lot of benefit in just serving that way. And maybe they could go and be the visionary, but at some point they're going to die. And what's the value of training another visionary rather than being the visionary?
Right. No, you're absolutely right.
Training those things. So there's a lot of different reasons why somebody might get into these various things. Now, again, I'm asking this question for the audience so they can just think, okay, I've heard of franchises, but we all think of, I would say a lot of people that I know, that I talk to, they think of franchises really in terms of, for the most part, fast food type or food.
Exactly. You are 150%
That's like the majority thing that somebody thinks about. But I know, and there's some really wacky, random franchises that actually do very well, but you'd never know or never think about that it was in a franchise model. So what are some things just to expand their mind, like, well, this could be a franchise. This has been a franchise. I've seen this as a franchise. What are some other things outside? Because for one, I hate the food industry. That's the last place I would be going if I wanted a franchise, I'm pretty sure, just because I don't like the food industry.
It's understandable. Food is not hard work. It's long work. There are a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces. So again, those are the things that I talk about my clients. But you're absolutely right. I think the perception of people who look at franchises think of the golden arches and the $5 footlong. Mm-hmm. And as my friend Emily says, who I've done a lot of work with as far as the brands that she represents and introducing people to her, she says there's a lot more beyond the golden arches and the $5 footlong. And to give you an idea, there are 4,000 franchises in the U.S. 4,000. And right now, there's probably over 500,000, 700,000 businesses that are operating in the U.S. that are franchises. So what are we talking about? Getting away from food, we're talking about home services. Anything from mowing a lawn to putting on a roof to gutters to painting to tearing down a wall and rebuilding. There's senior care, there's child care, there's child education, there's cosmetology. You could just go on in the list. And the problem that people face is that they go online, they start checking some boxes, and all of a sudden they're inundated with things and people calling them that they never really inquired about or know nothing about. Our approach, and my company's approach, is let's just break it down and really kind of try to simplify what you're looking for. But you are absolutely right, Sam. I mean, the perception that people have about franchising is McDonald's and the $5 foot long, or Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried Chicken. And those are all great organizations.
Sure.
But as I tell people, you have to have a different mentality to be in that category. You got to have thick skin, because there's a lot of moving parts to businesses like that.
Yeah, and just like the way I think of it is, if shiz hits the fan, which it could anytime, that's kind of the deal of being a business owner, is at the end of the day, the buck stops somewhere.
Yep.
And if you're the owner, it stops with you. And so as much as, yeah, you want to come in and be able to delegate everything, and that would be the ideal scenario, what are you willing to roll up your sleeves and get to work in? Like, if worse comes to worse, what are you actually willing to step in and do? Yeah, you want to be the delegator, but in the event that you can't be the delegator, what are you willing to get involved in? And
great point.
And there's just some things, I'm not willing to get involved in. but that doesn't mean they're not good businesses. I mean, like, you think of, like, every time you see a porta potty, you could be in the porta potty franchise.
I use that exactly. That's the example I use a lot. I mean, it's breaking down, what are you in the business for? Are you looking to build something as a legacy, pass on, or are you just looking to make money? I mean, do you have an ego? Can you tell your friends that you own a multi-million-dollar business selling portable toilets? Can you sit at a dinner table and tell people that? Well, there are people that, I can. And then, believe it or not, there are people that, no, I could never, I could never say that. And that's okay. I mean, I get it, but we have to take that into consideration. Ego, community driven. What are you comfortable? Where's your space? And, what are you comfortable delegating? Franchisors, brands don't need people to flip burgers and make $5 footlongs. What they need is people who can manage, delegate, and scale. That's what franchisors are looking for. Yeah.
And that's where I think that understanding the value of maybe how to get into them, what's like if somebody were thinking about a friend, I know there's a process here. So I want you to explain the process of, they first come and say, hey, I'm thinking about getting a franchise, thinking about it. It's among that, or buying real estate, or just sticking my money in the bank. Like, it's a thought. I'm not even emotionally connected to the thought. I just am curious. From there to where somebody actually signs on a dotted line, go through the process, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to tell me all 9 months of it, right? But what's the process as far as, like, some of the key highlights? Because sometimes people think, well, they're too scared to take the first step because they think the first step is committing them to the end step.
Yep.
And that's just, it's not the case with a lot of things, but it's by law, it's not the case with franchising. Like, they've done a lot to make sure there's multiple.
Yeah, there are timelines. There are steps. Yeah. The best analogy I can give you about understanding the process of learning about a brand or brands. Typically, my clients are talking to 1 or 2 brands at a time, no more than 2, maybe 3. I should say 3 is the limit, because it gets too time consuming. You got to figure somewhere between 1 and 2 hours a week on each brand to go through the process and learn more. I mean, you're not going to learn everything on the first call. You're not going to learn it on the second call. There's a process here. And the reason there's a process, Sam, is because franchisors want to know that you can follow a process. I mean, if you can't follow this process, how are you going to follow the process to be successful? And there are people that are just not comfortable with the process. So to answer your question, the first thing that somebody has to give themselves or get themselves to is give themselves permission to want to learn. It's as simple as that. If you can put yourself in a position to want to learn and move forward from there, you've got 25% down. You're going to be uncomfortable in the process. You're going to you're going to hear things that are uncomfortable. There are things you're going to hear that, like I said, are uncomfortable. You hear about certain situations that may be uncomfortable, but that's a good thing because as you become uncomfortable, that generates more questions. So if you give yourself the ability and permission to learn, you've opened up the door. But if you go into this process thinking that you know more than everybody else and you're the expert, it's going nowhere. People forget that franchises are awarded. They're awarded to people who can follow the process, and the franchisor thinks and believes that you're going to delegate the systems and be successful. Just because you have the financial means does not mean you're going to be awarded. And trust me, I've seen people with multi-million dollars sitting in the bank that were declined because they were just jerks and wouldn't and thought that they knew more than everybody else. I always use the analogy, Sam, call up the CEO or president of McDonald's and tell him that you want to be a franchisee with McDonald's, but you want to change the golden arches to green arches. And let me know what he says.
Yeah, no.
So you got to give yourself the ability to learn. But if you have to figure that the process is going to take a minimum of 90 days up to 6 months to make a validated decision. And that's how that's what I tell my clients. Anything quicker is just you're kidding yourself.
Sure. Well, I think so there's a lot of different business models out there, and some are franchise, some are brokerage, some are multi-level, and there's a lot of similarities and pros and cons of each model. And then there's just straight like grind your teeth out and build a business. Like what I call the ultimate pyramid scheme, right? Is that the CEO at the top makes all the money and then they have a bunch of workers underneath them. There's that model too. but
right.
But what I'm curious about, because one of the things that I've heard and people have said or asked questions about after these podcasts is, well, what if I bought a bad franchise? As in, like, I bought a franchise and I didn't know that they lied to me on the numbers. They cooked the books. Talk to us about like some of the disclosures that have to happen and why franchising might be a more vettable, like you're actually able to vet the companies more so than some of these other business models. Not that they're bad or wrong, but when you're walking into purchasing a franchise, there's things that are required to be disclosed to you. So you're walking in more eyes wide open than potentially another business. So talk to us a little bit about that.
One word, and that's validation. And this is something that I drill into my clients and work with my clients during the process when they get to that validation stage. Most franchise systems have all franchises have what's called a franchise disclosure document. It's an FDD, that's what it's referred to. In the FDD is the franchise agreement. To put it in simple terms, the 2 key or 3 key items, 23 items in the FDD, there's item 3, which clearly illustrates or tells you about any potential or existing lawsuits. So if there aren't any, that's even better. 2, item 7 is your investment range, and it breaks down the investment on what each component is. But the important one in the FDD is the item 19, which is the financials, the revenues, or the average revenues. Now, the Federal Trade Commission has not streamlined this so that all item 19s are equal among each franchisor. So you have to read between the lines. And here's the best lesson I can give people that are looking at a franchise and looking at an item 19 or discussing numbers with a franchisor. A franchisor cannot discuss or can only discuss what's in the item 19 or it's published in the item 19. So if they say that the average store that is open more than 5 years is earning $300,000 a year income, they have the documentation to go with that. That's the only thing they can discuss. So here's my point. You have to go out and talk to those franchisees in the system. You just got to start talking to people. And your first question when you call them up isn't how much money did you make? Get to know these people. Just get to know them. Tell me about your experience. Did they support you the way they said they would when you were looking for a location, a retail location? How is the marketing support? Warm up to them and then talk to them about, can you tell me what you're sharing? What kind of income? Their item 19 says this. Where are you? Remember, averages have a high and they have a low.
Sure.
You have to decide where you want to be. Are you going to be the A franchisee? Or are you going to be the low-level franchisee? So validation is the key to researching and exploring an opportunity after you have decided that I, one, feel I can be successful, and two, believe in the systems and the franchisor, the people that are going to work with me and help me run this business and be successful.
And I think that's another key, and that's with any business. These are getting into not just business principles, but you could even say family, relationship, any type of business. Most of the time, and I told my wife this when we, like this third date, okay, that if she's planning on marrying who I am that day and that's who I'm going to be, then we should not get married, right? Because that's not who I am. I mean, right. It is who I was that day, but my intention is to be changing and evolving. And so if you're going to bet on Sam, don't bet on who he is today. If you're betting on who he is today, you're going to be very disappointed in life, I think. Both because I'm going to change and maybe I'll stay the same. That would be even worse, right? But you're going into business with people. As much as you're going into business with a corporation, you're going to sign contracts with corporations. Generally, you're not going to sign contracts with actual individuals. I think it would be unwise to do that. But generally, it's going to be a business signing a contract with a business. But the point is, are the people that you're going into business with, can you count on them? When you talk to a lot of investors who are like angel investors or startup investors, you ask them, what made you decide to pick them over the next guy who was selling the same thing? And it's not because of the widget that they're selling, but they say, look, I can see that that's a person. They have traits, they have things. That's a person that no matter what the widget is, we're going to find a way to be successful. And that's the type of person I want to work with. And so as much as you're vetting the business and validating whether the business's actual numbers are accurate, just as much as you're doing that, you're validating the leadership and do I want to be in business with this person? Do I want
exactly? You want to know that you're absolutely right. So you want to know that you can get along with that person and have a debate about systems, best practices, or things that you may want to do or want to try. You don't have to agree all the time. It's just being able to get along and work things out. It's like a marriage. I mean, marriages break down not because of they may still love each other, but they can't communicate. That's really where and business is the same way. I remember when I had a client once who I was working with, and he called me up and they said, hey, I found a resale that I'm going to invest in. I said, oh, congratulations. Tell me about it. And it was in an industry, and they were on, and when he got done telling me about it, the revenues were well below what the norm was in that particular industry, based on the franchise and what I knew. So I said, have you looked at the client profile of why the business is lower than most businesses? He says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, this person has been in business for 25 years and is operating at a lower spectrum than everybody else. My bet is that the people that they're doing business with are people that want to do business with him and know him and have built a relationship. He doesn't want to go get new business. He's tired. What's going to happen when you buy the business and he leaves? Is that business going to exit? Are they going to open the door up to new vendors and take on bids, whatever it may be? Well, sure enough, he bought that business, and a year later, he called me up and said, "Scott, you are absolutely right. How do I sell this business?" So I was
Yeah, it's not worth anything.
so the validation has to be there. You've got to dig deep, not only into the numbers, but the validation into the systems, where the business is. Do you fit into that business? Is it what you want within your community? So there's a lot to be considered when you're looking at a franchise or in any business in general.
Yeah, and just on that note, communication being a key factor there. I've known other franchisees who have multiple different types of franchisees. So some of them are in the food industry, some of them are not in the food industry. But depending on the age of the franchise or like how long these businesses have been being franchised, it's not that they won't have the right data for you, but some of them are more willing to accept feedback than others.
Yes.
And some franchisors, although they've got their business to a point where they can franchise it out, they're not at a point where they're silent to feedback.
Yep. I call that the open door policy.
And that could be a leadership thing where it's like, okay, well, this is maybe a direction. I mean, one thing that just came out recently, which I think is, I don't know how it's going to end, honestly, but it's in the news right now. So I'll talk about it. It's public-ish. But when the franchisor chooses to have certain marketing partners that individual franchisee owners don't morally align with, what happens in that situation? How does that, I mean, you probably know more about the ins and outs of that story than I do without using names of companies, but some franchisees have lots more latitude of what they're going to accept from corporate and what they're not going to accept. Others, it's a shit stick. You just got to do what it is.
Yeah. And everything, look, franchisors have, and again, there are different levels of franchisors. I mean, there are emerging brands, people that are just getting started, maybe have less than 50 units open. There are those middle of the road people that have come out of that embryonic stage, now have 150, 200, locations or, stores open and you go up from there. So you have to, pick where you feel comfortable with. And, it's one of the things that I talk about with my clients is that risk factor, low, medium, high risk. If you want a low risk, then you really need to go to a franchise that really is established. Everything's churning. A higher risk franchise may be something that's embryonic, early stages, but you know what? You're going to be part of that development strategy, building the brand. So they're going to be open to newer ideas. If you're a Subway franchisee or a McDonald's franchisee, I mean, look what Subway went through. I mean, they're finally getting to a point where their franchisees are now getting comfortable. Dunkin' the same way. Dunkin' added menu items, and finally the franchisees threw up their hands and said, "You know what? Too many items, too many people, too many SKUs. Let's simplify it the way it used to be." So you have to pick and choose where you are comfortable and how much you want to be involved in building the brand or being part of the brand. Some people they just want to run their location or locations and go from there. Some want to be involved in the brand, come up with great ideas. They want to be the inventor.
Yeah, which I think it's all part of the conversation of you identifying what do you want to do, and it's invaluable to speak with somebody like Scotty who has. The thing is, you might think, "Oh, I've looked at these 2 or 3 options. I've thought about it, but I'm not interested." But that's kind of like me saying, "Do I know how to fix my pool heater outside?" I'm like, "Well, I troubleshooted everything the manual said to troubleshoot, and it's not working." But I still call the expert because the expert has real practical knowledge. They've seen 1,000 different pool heaters. They know how to troubleshoot it in ways the manual doesn't necessarily teach you. And that's how it is talking with Scotty. He has a lot of different information, so he can pick up from a conversation, okay, this whole sector of franchise may not even be in your wheelhouse. And so then you think you're not interested, but really you could be very interested if you're willing to open your mind and be willing to learn and say, okay, what would that look like? And so the first step, and I think you mentioned it multiple times, is just be open-minded to the process.
Yep. Give yourself permission to learn. Get uncomfortable because It's kind of like going out, car shopping or clothes shopping. You have you have your blinders on and you walk into the men's shop or the women's shop or the car dealership and you know what you want. But when you start peeking through the blinders and start looking at other things, you realize, wow, wait a minute, this may be better. This may be more value. This may have a little bit more of what I want. May cost a little less, but maybe it's going to give me this, or cost a little more, but I'm going to get that. So it's getting yourself uncomfortable and putting yourself in a position to want to learn. People don't understand that when you work with somebody like myself, you don't have to invest. Right. I would rather you say no now than call me up. And it's happened to me twice in my years of doing this, where someone has said, hey, I made a mistake. How do I get out of this? So I'd rather you say no now. And the brand would rather you say no now, because they don't want people. Brands don't want to set. Franchisors are not looking for people just to pay a franchise fee. They make their money on the royalties. So they want people that are going to be successful. If you're not going to be successful, you shouldn't do it.
Right. And they do in all my experience, they do a good job at helping you identify.
Yes. Yep.
And that's why I didn't even know about this. So I started podcasting, that there was even like a franchise broker, like that's a job. And I was like, what? I thought you just went and bought a franchise. Yeah. No, it's a whole career, just like a matchmaker in marriages or anything. Like there's a reason that there's a career there. What I think they need to do is create the next TV show of that.
There you go.
TV show, Scotty.
Yeah. I always use the analogy that if I had a check for you for $25,000 to go through my process, would you do it? And of course, if you had that option, you'd probably say yes. Who wouldn't, right? Sure. Well, my guidance, and again, you have to find a consultant you're comfortable working with, you can trust. Okay, yep. and that's a given. And you should find someone like that in that position that you feel comfortable with. But my guidance and support may be worth a lot more than $25,000 when this is all said and done and 5 years down the road. Because if I showed you that franchising is not for you, I just saved you a lot of headaches. 95% of the people that come through me that have inquired about a brand that I'm advertising, because I do a lot of different marketing approaches to get people in, 95% of the people who inquire about a specific brand don't go with that brand after they've gone through my process. Because I've taken them down a road and built a platform for them that doesn't match up to really what they want. So right. Most people who look at restaurants want a restaurant because they see a long line. Chick-fil-A is a perfect example. It's not a franchise, traditional anyway. But the reason people want Chick-fil-A is because they see the long line of cars. That's all. They have no idea what it's like to be a franchisee for 5 years with Chick-fil-A, the amount of work. You're paid handsomely, don't get me wrong, but you don't own the building. You can't own the building. You don't own the business, so you can never sell it. And after 5 years or whatever their contract is, if they don't want to renew it, see you later. Now, you want that? That's
more
fine.
Employees, man. I don't know how Chick-fil-A consistently employs more people than any other fast food restaurant I've ever seen in my life.
If I had a nickel, I should say $1 for every time someone called me up during the week and asked me, one, can you get me a Starbucks or a Chick-fil-A or get me into Chick-fil-A, I'd be sitting on a beach or on a boat right now, retired.
Dutch Bros, man. Dutch Bros are coming up. Dutch Bros are coming up.
They are. They are.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be more regional, whether they beat out Starbucks, but they're definitely, there's a divide there. Some people love Dutch Bros, won't touch Starbucks, or vice versa. So,
well, it's the other way. I mean, hey, look,
like Apple and Android.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, so I'm curious, just winding down here. What are some books that people could read to really help maybe start milking their brain for ideas of whether or not this is even something they should move forward with? What are some books that you would recommend?
I have a very dear friend of mine that I do some partnering with. Her expertise is really more in helping people franchise their business. So we do a lot of partnering that way. But she wrote a book called The Right Franchise for You. It's by Faizun Kamal. Escape the 9-to-5, generate wealth, and live life on your own terms. I send a copy of this to all my clients that start on the initial process because it's a great read. It's a great story. So that would be the book. I would encourage you to listen to podcasts like yours, entrepreneurs, any type of entrepreneur podcast. David Sandler writes a book called "You Can't Teach a Kid to Write a Book in a Seminar." That's an ideal book for me, again, because if you're going to get into a service-based business, you got to have a sales aptitude. You got to be comfortable in front of people. If you're not comfortable in front of people, you're going to have to look at a retail business. Retail businesses usually cost more than service-based businesses. So again, you have to make all these decisions to look at things. So those are two books that I really enjoy. I read the David Sandler book. I've probably read it 50, 60 times already. And again, the name of that is You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike in a Seminar. It's the psychology of, the sales process and understanding people and getting to know your clients.
I've never heard of that book, so I'll have to get it and listen to it. Awesome. So when it's all said and done, I know you've lived a life that you're happy with. What do you want to be remembered as? If you were talking to your great grandchildren and they said, "Hey," I asked them, what does Scotty's life mean to you? What do you hope that your legacy means after you pass on?
I want to know that I helped some people make a decision, the right decision. Give back without expecting something back in return. The biggest thing for me is when I get calls from my clients, and I generally stay in contact with all the people that I help get into business or not into business. I stay in contact, the thank you every 6 months, or, "Hey, Scott, just wanted to give you an idea that heads up that, we just added our 3rd and 4th location. Thank you very much." So, I just want to be able to give back and understand. There is a kindness to this world, and I'd like to be part of the kindness. We tend to look at things, or people are looking at things that we're always butting heads now, but I don't think that's the case. I think people like myself, a consultant, helping people through this process, we bring a big value and guidance to someone. You can choose to do it yourself. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but, just dot your I's and cross your T's. But that's how I want my legacy, my grandkids and kids to look at me and just say, he helped people out. And you know what? Scotty was really a nice guy. He wasn't a jerk about this. He took no. He walked away when we said no. He didn't try to fight me on it. He didn't try to put this in he was trying to sell me a timeshare.
Sure.
I just, that's my legacy.
Cool. Well, I love it. I appreciate your time today. And I'm so grateful that you're able to share your words of wisdom and your experience. And I just hope people listen, it just takes a small step and the rest of your life could change for better or worse. I think that learning what doors are shut and shutting doors actually has a lot of emotional benefit. Because now you're not wondering anymore. You say, you know what, right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Look, value to clarity.
It's easier to make a decision when you've learned more and know more. Mm-hmm. It's harder. People who can't make a decision usually are the people that don't want to learn more. It's just an easy way out. But learn more and then make a decision. Get to that validated decision, not emotional.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much, Scotty. And
thank you for having me
on the Fuel Your Legacy show.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.